How are you, mate? Good to see you.
Hi, Eric. Good to see you. Okay, so I think we can start. Thank you so much for being here. I'm super happy to engage with you and to be part of this conference. I will try to make like really my best to make this conversation like super friendly and super close to engage with actually like an artist vision and to let ourselves to be moved by. So thank you so much, Eric, for the gift of your art and also the gift of your presence. As you know, this space is part of a larger conversation on creativity and faith and theology and digitality and other topics. And today we are slowing down to really pay attention to this vision you bring us with your art. So thank you so much for showing up, not just for this conversation, but also for, like the kind of attention and risk your work invite us. So just to start, I would like to simply ask if you can lead us to your world for a moment, introduce yourself, introduce your current work, and feel free to share some images if you like.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's just good to be speaking with you all from New York City. Just to give you a brief bio, I'm a painter, a contemporary artist living and working here in New York. Been here with my family for the last 16 years, working specifically within the field of contemporary art. I have my studio just 10 blocks from where I am now, here in my apartment. And our family's life revolves around the studio in many ways. Um, I I want to specifically speak today, and Kike and I have been preparing for this panel for some time now, but about one particular body of work, and actually you can see one of the
Yeah,
paintings behind me from that series, a series simply called O. Um, because of the loading circle that sits at the center of each of these works. These are traditional oil on canvas paintings, even though they present as something digital, specifically the loading image of a social media post, one that's not quite coming through. And of course, the joke or the idea is that because it's oil on canvas, it's just never, there will never be any resolution. This is a perpetual liminal space. So that's just to lay the groundwork today of our conversation. Um, and I do have a bit of a presentation just to kind of open up that world, the world of the O paintings, to give
sure.
you an idea of how they've been exhibited. Is there a way that I can share my screen, Craig?
I don't know. I think that the best way to know is just try, and
Okay, yeah, let's try.
the host
Let's
can
try.
allow you.
Okay, let's try. See here. Let me.
No?
Um.
You should be
Yeah.
co-host.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Just for the excitement and the rush, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Kike from Mexico. I'm a designer too, and I'm super excited to connect with this conversation because we have some similarities in the work we do. And yeah, just to present this panel interview and to share with you all.
Mhm. So just for clarification, can you see the full screen uh, presentation on your end?
I think not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah,
Okay. Here we go.
there it is. Yeah.
All right. So the purpose of some of these details is to actually be able to see the brush strokes. If you look carefully, You can see that this is not a printed image. This is not sprayed. These are carefully applied brush marks that have been canceled out to create all soft edges. The works themselves take about 16 hours, and because of the soft focus, I cannot stop. So the minute I begin one of these paintings, I'm immediately immersed in a world of blur, and nothing can be paused because I'm actually fighting the drying time of the painting. So it's as if I'm literally generating one of these blurry images nonstop through my body. So there's very little sleep. There's tons of exhaustion, and when I begin a painting, it feels like I'm about to start some kind of endurance marathon.
Yeah.
They were. Yeah, Kike, you were going to say.
Yeah, you talk about the liminal spaces, and I love this concept of transition, and like just showing up before the threshold of moments in our lives. Why is this unresolved or perpetual loading state so spiritually or emotionally charged for you? Like, how do you hope people feel in front of this work, or even if you can share your experience in your own liminal spaces that are the inspiration behind this?
Yeah, well, it's funny because initially, just very matter of factly, I was so addicted to my Instagram that I would try to look at it on the subway, and so I would be scrolling even though I was underground and not getting proper signal, right? So it was this idea of, even in my own personal liminal commuting spaces between places in New York City, that I was still somehow working to tap into the addiction, the need, the need for imagery. And so the whole series was born out of this, because it was my realization that that in the liminal spaces of my own life and my need to try to fill them with something, that I was coming up with only this kind of imagery. And actually, I was standing next to a film director friend of mine on the train, and he was saying, looking over my shoulder as I was desperately scrolling through a whole feed of these loading images, and he said, "Those are really beautiful, actually." And then it triggered something in my mind. As far as the viewer's experience, initially I had thought, oh, maybe this will be peaceful for them. Like, they'll just sort of embrace the beautiful colors, that they can sort of rest, and that this is a place of meditation. It was the opposite, actually. Most people would come to the show and they say, "This gives me so much anxiety. I cannot deal with these paintings," because they were so they had been so attuned to long for the image to resolve,
right,
to come through. So actually, my hope that these would be somehow peaceful, beautiful images was met with the opposite reaction.
Yeah. I love that. It's like a clear invitation for contemplation, but not, I would say, like, not with the eyes of our body, but really with another kind of eyes, like trying to engage and contemplate something that we cannot see fully. It's something that spiritually speaks to me, and it's striking to see something that can be helpful to become more teachable in these realities that we cannot understand fully. One of the attitudes that I love of liminal spaces, when we walk through them, is that we can become more humble, like not understanding everything we have in front. Do you resonate somehow with this? Like, is this artwork something related to something deeper in your spirituality? I mean, it's super deep, but I'm just trying to wondering what else is behind.
Absolutely. I feel that what initially I think was desperate longing for our validation and this sort of doom scrolling ended up in a place of meditation, contemplation, slowing down. The pace of my life when these paintings were initially started, the series, was incredibly frenetic. I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, but through the process of sitting in front of these works, I mean, if we're actually talking about the 16 hours that's needed just to
Right.
make each one, there's this physical embodiment of slowness and vulnerability. And so in some ways it was almost making the body of work what was exactly what you said. Um, Forcing myself into a space of vulnerability
Right.
and slowness,
Mhm.
uh, even even as the pace of the city continued at some kind of other frenetic pace. And I think I've always felt like that with this body of work, that the reason people, New Yorkers, were having a problem with them, and they were so anxiety inducing, is because they were asking them to slow down, and that was something that was actually difficult for them to do. And so I think maybe these paintings do take some time. I know that they have been working on me now for many years, to the point where I can actually um, I've actually adopted a slower pace in my own life now that
Mm.
I'm 41. You know, I started this painting back in 2017, the series of paintings back in 2017. And um, I have been able to adopt a certain kind of holistic slowness in my own life because of this body of work that I think I otherwise would never have been able um, to access. And I think it's because of this sort of embrace of liminality, as you said.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is powerful. Thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much. I would like to highlight how, from experience of anxiety, there's an exploration and a reframe of beauty. So I would like
Mm-hmm.
to ask, how do you navigate beauty and anxiety in your work? How is the tension in between these two? Because the proximity to spiritual practice through this work, the rhythms you are talking about, the fruits you are starting to bring to others. I don't know, it just feel like a vicio divina or something like that, like a practice to really slow down and to
Mm-hmm.
open our senses to other things. But how is this tension for you between beauty and anxiety?
All of my work, not just this body of work, deals with beauty and anxiety. I think that my paintings sort of ride the razor's edge of these things. Um, uh, I remember for so long, early on, for years, when I was just studying painting and studying art history, being drawn to the paintings that were doing this already within art history. Also, specifically, strangely, the marginalia of illuminated manuscripts. I don't know if you've ever spent time looking at this. If you could just do a quick Google search, illuminated manuscript marginalia, what you have is you have the sacred text, and then you
Mhm.
have the doodles of young monks, essentially, you know,
Mm.
who were illuminating these manuscripts. And what the funny thing is that, of course, there's the sacredness of the text written beautifully, and then the marginalia itself is very crass or
Mm.
depraved in many senses. So you have these strange one-eyed, one-legged creatures, sometimes just a giant phallus, you know, bouncing along the marginalia. And I always remember thinking that these are the hopes, dreams, anxieties, sort of like weird human longings of these monks
Yeah.
who are spending hours and hours and hours writing this sacred text, and probably also adolescent, you know. And so there's sort of this
Mm.
um hormonal quality to the marginalia. And I
Yeah.
just remember thinking that this is the perfect example of beauty and somehow like anxiety or longing. And this was very influential for me on a conceptual level, fundamentally, um, for all of my work. And I think this body of work I've always thought as kind of existing perhaps in that space. um,
Mhm. Mhm.
I think all of my work is somehow filtered through this idea of illuminated manuscript marginalia, or the things that sit just to the side of the sacred text.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful. I was sharing with some friends yesterday from the laboratory I work with. It's a laboratory for apostolic creativity, and we were sharing something really similar. We did a campaign also inspired by blurred images, but our concept was like to regain attention and to go back to the sacredness of ordinary things. And your work to me is like a reference now to these things we are missing because we are so distracted. Like we are waiting for these images to load, but in front we have, like you mentioned, like you were in the metro or we were walking or we are doing many things, always trying to divide our attention. To somehow for me, it's like a I don't know, like a reframe of like a digital icons for this collective anxiety. Uh, for you, Eric, is social media a kind of collective unconscious, or like beyond this experience that was like super simple but enlightening? What is your approach or what is your take on social media?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, a collective consciousness, but I think beyond that, sort of a encapsulation of our longings and our desires, you know. And of course now, like, your social media is different than mine because, you know, the algorithm has become so good
Right.
at giving you what you want and giving me what I want. You know, I joined a CrossFit gym 2 years ago, and now my feed is just all CrossFit content. You know, it's
Yeah.
crazy to the point where it's just it sounds so stupid, but I mean that's like it never was that until, you know. And I just think about how then that has even led me to how I spend my money, you know, because of the targeted ads, and then you think, well, these things are stupid, they're not going to work, but it's so good now, I think, at diving into our individual longings and desires, that we do end up, there are physical consequences in the real world, you know,
Right.
from these things. Um, I think my hope, um, if we're talking about what I would like sort of the paintings to embody, and I think they were
Mhm.
born out of an exhaustion for me, a very real
Mhm.
exhaustion with
Mhm.
this these feedback loops. And even this, just the idea that, like, somehow, um, I need to, if I want to exist as a person or feel validated as a person or even feel like I'm alive, then somehow
Mhm.
I'm constantly engaging or needing to engage. Otherwise, there's this idea of massive FOMO, like fear of missing out, like you're just sort of missing out on
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that, uh, if I could, I remember thinking, if I could bring viewers of these paintings to a place where they have reached a certain kind of bone deep exhaustion and dissatisfaction, perhaps with at least their own, perpetual FOMO, you know, like maybe
Mhm.
that these paintings could at least embody for us, like you say, icons, you know, pointing to the need to disengage, or
Right. Yeah.
and I just remember feeling like this is not a healthy place for me, and
Mhm.
how can I in some ways provide some healthy distance,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and the blurred lens of these paintings, I think, is at least suggesting that.
But for me, you know, like it's powerful to recognize and to listen to your own senses and say, hey, this is not healthy for me, but at the same time taking something from that space
Mm,
to create something better and more sacred, and that feels like a possibility of contemplation for others, not only for you. For me, like this approaches to mundanity or to the world, it's always like a conflict because many people in some context of like religion and theology, you know, many people is like we need to reject mundanity and we need to like the approach is somewhat
mm,
it's somehow like in that direction. In other contexts, of course, is like, okay, let's try enculturation or let's try to find God in all things and so on. For me, what you
mm,
do is it's beautiful because you take inspiration from a place that can feel dark and you take some elements and doing it analog, I don't know, it turns to be something innovative, refreshing, but at the same time, it's impossible to not pay attention and to try to see what is there, like what is this reflecting to me, or do I have a memory like similar to what is behind that blur or something? So I don't know, for me, this exercise is like a translation and creating a bridge between digitality and analog spaces, but deeper things. I would like to invite also all the people connected here and all the people that are in Chicago to prepare some questions at the end of our chat. We'll have some time also to open microphones for more participation. What else do we have here in my in my script? I don't know if you want to share something also like inspiration behind or references for your work.
Yeah, that's a great question. Inspirations behind, references. Well, I mean, we could talk about this idea that I'm a trained photorealist painter and that these are technically photorealist paintings, and yet they are absolutely functioning within this liminal space between realism and abstraction. And I think that this is all, I always tell people, yes, I'm a trained photorealist, but I have a very tenuous relationship with photorealism, in that I'm always trying to push against the image, this idea of the image, or the clear image, or this idea that painting needs to project an illusion of reality, right? So somehow this space did that for me very acutely. And of course, I'm thinking about the abstract expressionist. I'm thinking about the history of minimalism. The loading circle is like the perfect minimal motif that references, artists like Olivier Mosé. You have the sort of soft focus of the poor paintings of Helen Frankenthaler, just different things, all present. So as far as the history of art, the history of painting, I think that there's all of these connection points to older practices. I think that it's important for me too that people come to these paintings and there's a moment when they think, oh, I didn't even know that was a painting, and I didn't even know that painting could do that. That I had never even thought that maybe, because I think people have these preconceived notions of what an oil painting is in their mind. Whether it's Picasso or Caravaggio or whether it's Jackson Pollock, and or whatever. And I think that these paintings somehow subvert people's maybe preconceived notions of what a painting even is or can do, how it can function on a wall. You mentioned Monet, and if you, like I said, it always helps to get up close to these paintings in real life. Of course, this is even just the details aren't enough, but the way that the paint is applied is a pointillist sort of canceling process. Yeah. Small little brush daubs. We say daubs, right? And I remember thinking, like little pixels. Exactly. It's exactly right. And so every time the brush touches it, you're literally kind of increasing the resolution of the painting. And I think that I remember thinking, oh, this is very impressionist. And so like the way that Seurat would apply the paint, or Monet even in some cases. And somehow I felt tied very intimately, maybe from a headspace perspective and like a heart and soul perspective, as I'm making these paintings. And I remember thinking, this is probably how they felt when they were making their paintings, at least to some degree. And yet the subject matter and the approach is completely different.
Just referring to Monet, I'm not an expert, but I think for me, the difference is that his approach was more like to understand light and color and to make it, like tangible in some way. Like the textures with him, it's so different. And with you, I don't know, it's a combination where absence and even silence take another place. So I would like to ask, what is the role of silence and absence both in your work and also in your perception?
Hmm. Uh, yeah, I there's this mode or this way of thinking within contemporary painting now that you're supposed to make paintings that say nothing,
Mm,
literally say nothing. And I remember thinking, well, that's very sad. It's um, this embrace of total meaninglessness, or a way to maybe make a painting that is doing something, but is also basically just an act of
yeah, yeah,
silence.
yeah.
You know, um, I did find the idea compelling, but yet the full embrace of the idea I found to be very sad. I should
Mm,
be clear. Um, and I also remember, the very first time I learned to stretch a canvas. I don't know if any of you have done this before, where you have this beautiful piece of white canvas and you stretch it tight over the stretcher bars, and it's like a drum. It's just boom,
mm,
boom, boom,
yeah,
boom.
yeah.
And as a young artist, when you learn to do this, you fall in love with that thing right away. You're just like, oh, now I have to paint something on it. Why? Because it's so beautiful. Like, his thing is so gorgeous. And a lot of artists end up in the studio with that beautiful white thing on the wall and are immediately struck with fear and anxiety because that thing is compelling,
Yeah,
to some
yeah,
degree. Uh, and so there's a story of William de Kooning where he would force himself to draw or paint quickly a letter of the alphabet onto any letter, didn't matter, in the middle of the
hmm.
canvas, just to break the
Just to
silence.
break,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So this is embedded within contemporary painting, these ideas of, oh, I don't really want to say anything and this is
Mm,
beautiful, but I have to do something, right? And so I think I remember thinking that these paintings were probably the simplest gesture towards nothingness or silence that I could make. Otherwise, I mean, if you go to my website, there's other bodies of work that are very loud. They're more like a shout. They're more like they have some political opinions sort of immersed in there, or you can definitely see maybe where I lean as far as like my opinions about um, yeah, certain art ideas, lots of ideas. This was almost zero idea, or very, very base level idea. And the intervention was a one shot intervention. And it is, as you say, sort of, or at least the closest I could get to saying nothing.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and yet, in some ways, I feel like this body of work says more than
Mm,
even the paintings that I've made, where I really am wanting people to kind of get in on the conversation.
mhm,
I
mhm.
think because I think, and this is another thing too, because I think a lot of times when we try to control the conversation and we posit many ideas within a body of work, they end up being they end up forcing the viewer to kind of do homework, or
Right.
want to, or have some kind of education that they need to bring to the image. I think these paintings are very simple in that um, they are so base level, kind of primal, and they speak to our souls where we are as digital people now.
Mm,
And I don't think it takes much. You don't need an art history education to come to this painting and just think like, well, that's a clever idea, or I like the colors, or how did he make that circle so perfect? These
yeah,
kinds
yeah,
of
yeah.
ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, I have the doubt. Like, how do you know when a painting is finished? Like, what is the
Mm,
final touch of this? It's only
mm,
completing the canvas, or is it something like you
mm.
want to refine?
Yeah. Well, with this body of work, it's when the paint no longer moves, because I've been working on it for so long that and
Right.
like I said, 16 hours. So the kind of oil paint that I work has a drying time of I guess now that I know this because I tried, but it's about 16 hours. So I would get up at 5 a.m. and start working, until whatever, 11 o'clock at night, and and then you just come up against the physical capabilities of the medium. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
if it was a particularly good day, then I knew, and I was painting fast, I knew that the painting was done when um, I was kind of going cross-eyed, not because I had been painting for so long, but because it was so soft and so blurry that I almost couldn't even see where one shape started and the other ended. You know, it was just kind of this blur. So it really was dictated by how blurry or I could get it. Um, as far as paintings in general, I mean, this is a massive conversation. I think thousands of hours of painting and sort of a sixth sense. Most artists will tell you that the painting resolves and essentially tells them that it's finished. So artists,
Okay. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think artists who have been painting a long time um, have these ongoing conversations and have a sensitivity and a relationship with the work that's in progress. And because not everyone's doing this,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to what you mentioned about saying something or doing something that is not directly saying something, uh, has your relationship with this risk of using your voice or your talent changed in some
Mm,
way? Like creating like this material for giving voice to others. Is there
mm.
like a meaning to you regarding that, like opening spaces for others with your voice, but in a silent mode, in a blurred mode?
Mm, mm. I mean, I think about others all the time. Um, as a painter, thinking about the audience is never really that productive, honestly.
Mm,
But I do think about others in terms of meaningful relationships. I have a mantra now in the studio. It's the world doesn't need another painting. And I think that this is my attempt to slow down. And if someone needs me in the world to help them move,
mhm.
or they just need to talk for 3 hours over coffee, then I give them my time because as an artist, my time is flexible. Um, and I just remember thinking that if I'm constantly giving the world paintings, then I'm usually alone in my studio, and maybe I'm depriving um, myself and others of this umbrella of friendship and
Yeah,
hospitality.
yeah.
So I do hope that my paintings sort of extend a sort of generosity of friendship and hospitality to people and feel
Mm,
like they're invited into something beautiful. But I just think there's never any they will never substitute real relationship and real hospitality and real generosity. Um, Inviting someone over for dinner and maybe they hit
right.
the paintings on the wall, and that's a nice thing. But
Mm,
inviting someone over for dinner will never, I think, um, be a substitute for walking into the gallery and just
yeah, yeah,
seeing a
yeah.
painting. I think that's where I am now. And I do. So the other thing is I've set up my studio practice. This is getting a little bit broader, but my studio is on the fourth floor of a townhouse, and it's an apartment. There's a kitchen, there's a bathroom, there's a living space. And if a young artist or someone who's visiting the city and who needs a place to stay, or who just wants to get away from their busy life and have some kind of retreat, the part of the city we live in is not the crazy part. We live in a very calm part just on top of Central Park. So it's a 30-second walk from my studio to the top of Central Park, and then you have miles of forest and stuff.
Mm,
So I've intentionally tweaked and honed my practice to include this kind of hospitality, actual hospitality,
well, yeah.
with the idea that the studio space also functions as a retreat space for people. The nice thing is, and this is it, is that you're sleeping there, you're reading there, and there's a lot of beautiful art. So that helps the whole process, and then of course the beauty of nature, just like I said, just 30 seconds away.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much. There's a question here in the chat that now that you mentioned stories and listening to others and
Mm,
inviting others to retreat, both in your studio and, of course, with your art,
mm,
is there like a particular, I don't know, like listening to stories that can reveal an image you want to portray behind this blur? Like, how do you decide what image to blur? Is that like something
Mm-mm.
that catch your attention, or you listen? How is this process?
Yeah. So I always do screen grabs of these images as they come through. And now my subway rides are more creative, productive times rather than anxiety-ridden doom
Yeah,
scroll
yeah,
sessions. Because if one is coming through and I'm like, wow, that's a very beautiful one. So I feel like I'm fishing, like I'm trying to
mm,
catch nice ones. The other thing is that if you're pulling into a station right as a beautiful one's coming through, you can lose it, and then you're like, I just missed it. So so I don't do it every subway ride, but if I'm thinking, oh, I want a few more in my belt, perhaps, then what I do is, so I'll have hundreds of these images, and then I will curate. There's a curatorial process, choosing which ones, maybe saying, okay, that one, no, not so much. But I never know. That's the thing, is I never know what the actual image is,
mm,
because it never came through. If I
right.
caught it, and it just goes away. So. Um, I have guesses, I have
Mhm.
certain guesses about like what this might be. I think this is a landscape, some kind of landscape with like at dusk with a sky, that's my idea. I could be completely wrong. I mean, other people have said
Yeah.
different things. But as far as how I choose, it's really just the ones that I feel like will function beautifully as paintings. The other thing I do, and this is getting in the weeds a bit, but I render everything into digital gallery spaces so that I can see how they might function in the real world. And so that's just cropping in, putting it on the wall in a gallery, putting a fake shadow underneath, and then seeing how it might work as a painting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Before opening for more questions from our audience, I would like to ask, what's one question you are sitting with these days?
Mm. That is a great question. Um, I think, how can I even be more present and available as a person to real people? And I think lately one of the things that has fallen to the wayside for me is this myth of the isolated artistic genius alone in his studio.
Mm, mhm.
I think that is exactly what I just said. It's a myth. It does not exist.
Mhm.
We like to have these ideas of Picasso sitting alone in his studio and coming up with these ideas, smoking a cigarette or something, and it just doesn't exist. I recently came across the story of Diego Velázquez painting in the Spanish court, and he was so frustrated because he was painting head and shoulder portraits on commission, for the royals on repeat. He was pigeonholed, and he longed to make massive, large scale paintings with multiple figures. And then Peter Paul Rubens, as the Flemish diplomat to the Spanish court, arrived. And Velasquez says, this is my chance, because he knew his work. And he said, this is the guy who
Mm,
makes the big,
yeah.
massive paintings with multiple figures. I could maybe I could learn from him. And so he approached him and he said, would you be willing to mentor me? And amazingly, Rubens said yes. He agreed. And so for the next, he said, I'm going to postpone my travel. So he sat with Diego Velasquez in the Spanish courts for I think a number of months, and walked him through a series of large scale paintings
Mm,
until they both felt that Velasquez had cracked the code, that he had acquired the skill. And then Rubens left, to the point where some historians believe that, well, I mean, it's to draw to a logical conclusion. We would not have Velasquez's masterpiece Las Meninas if it
right.
weren't for the instruction of Rubens, of Velasquez. So
Mm,
you have these stories like this that are not very popular. I had not heard it, and I had studied art history. And you realize, oh no, this was an act of generosity and hospitality on the part of Rubens to Velasquez, and we would not have this masterpiece. And so then I think when you come across stories like this, you realize that we need to be there for each other. And I
right.
think that's what I'm trying to do more. Get
Mm,
out of the studio, show up for people a little bit more, show up for young artists. Like I said, host them. If they need to talk through things, be available. That's what's on my mind now.
Wow, thank you so much, Eric. Your work really it's very prophetic, I would say. Like it's innovative, it's refreshing, it's retaking something that for many of us feels actually like a anxious place, but
Mm,
taking beauty from there and making turning into something contemplative. It feels really like prophetic for me. Thank you so much
thank you.
for this conversation. I don't know if there's someone that wants to jump in and open their microphone and to share a question. Also, I'm aware of the chat, and also I'm trying to be aware of time. If someone, Jonathan, I don't know if someone else wants to also let me know how we are doing with time. It would be great. There are some comments here in the chat. I don't know if you want to directly read it.
I'm looking now.
From Kate, I think that's yeah. From Kate Ott, she says, "Are you in Morningside Heights? There are two great. I think it's more like about location." And then
Very close to Morningside Heights. Yeah.
and before Caroline asks another question.
Yeah, which one are we looking at here?
She says, all paintings are a frozen moment in time. This challenges us on the moments we chose to freeze, that we usually chose to freeze the completed rather than the becoming, which says something about us. Yet you got nothing, here's completed.
Mm, mm,
And someone else says about the power of yet, like becoming, and maybe it's not completed or it's blurred, but maybe later it will be completed.
mm. Yeah, that's interesting. So the now but not yet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I do think that that's true, right? These images are pointing in a certain direction to a completely unresolved situation, pointing to the potential of a future resolution, right? Which I think actually that's very Christian.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't ask, by the way, yesterday and today, if you want to share like anything from your approach to faith. I have a question here. What happens when art becomes a space for faith to emerge? If you want to share some of your context, I think one of the precious things from this conference is the variety and diversity of approaches and contexts we share and we discover. So for you, this art, what kind of faith experience creates for
Mm.
you? And yeah, like what is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an ex-atheist. I was raised in the church, and then when I moved to New York to be a contemporary painter, I said, "Good riddance. I don't want I don't want anything to do with faith," because I had this desire to be seen as very sophisticated, and I didn't want to lose credibility in my work. That being said, I also felt like I was raised in a tradition with a fairly anemic theology or understanding of theology, and luckily I had came across a few people about 10 years into my life here in the city who are just incredibly deep thinkers, incredibly smart people, and believers, and over many coffee conversations, was able to realize that the story that I had been handed actually wasn't quite as robust
Yeah.
as the story had always been. And so then I came back to faith, but with a renewed lens, and also just a greater hope that the story is all encompassing and actually functions in a place like New York City. Believe it. Can you even believe it? You know, that kind of thing. Amazing. So as far as faith, that's kind of my journey and where I've ended up. And so all of my work, I think, comes from this place of a renewed hope.
Yeah.
But without being didactic, that's the last thing I want. You know, I don't want the work to sort of uh, speak in any kind of one-dimensional way. It needs to function.
Right. Yeah.
I did see that someone raised their hand, and are we doing verbal questions too? I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that
Yeah.
we don't miss it. Yeah. Yeah.
Only regarding this, I would like to
Yeah.
ask, like, not to. I also don't like to frame or to label things like in a very rigid way. So maybe I can reframe also my question. Do you see yourself as a witness, as a disturber, or as a contemplative? One of these
Mm,
three feels more
mm.
relatable to you?
Yeah, what did you say? Witness, disturber, or
Witness, disturber, or
contemplative?
contemplative?
Yeah, yeah. So interesting. Um, you know, I don't think disturber is the right word because I'm conflict averse as a person. But somewhere in between the contemplative and the witness. Maybe I'm a contemplative witness.
Mm.
Um, I tend to do a lot of witnessing without people realizing it, even in
Yeah.
conversation. Um, I'm part of a church community here that's a community of Christians and skeptics on purpose. You know, we really speak to atheists and agnostics,
Mm.
as well as Christians. You know, our whole church community is a mix. Um, and you know, people are always like, well, why do the atheists keep coming back to your church? You know, because you're a church, right? And I said, well, I think it's because we're contemplative and we're not trying to fight. We really want to have conversations with people, good faith conversations, and everything
Yeah.
sits under the umbrella of relationship, right? So
Right.
it doesn't matter if you're an atheist, I can be your friend, you know, and we can talk. And I think that this idea of epistemological humility comes into play. And I think my paintings are trying to embody a position of epistemological humility to some degree. Um, so yeah, I'm a contemplative witness.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. Caroline, do you want to make your question?
Actually,
Oh,
you asked my question. I wanted to ask about the faith dimension,
Oh, okay.
um, because for me these paintings you talked about had them making people anxious, and actually they had the reverse effect on me because I was
mm,
looking at it thinking I love being in that moment when nobody's wrong yet about what the image is,
mm,
where we might all be guessing, but
mm,
it's beautiful even if we don't know everything, and actually nobody's wrong yet, therefore we're all in a posture of humility towards the image, and I loved that. And I wondered whether
mm.
um if you were to take your painting into, let's say, an education wall, I just wonder what the conversation would would look like, and I wonder whether if you put one of these on TikTok, you know, or something like that, what would happen to it, what community would grow around that image and that concept.
That's so interesting. Just I've posted these on Instagram before, and even with the context of the gallery wall and the floor, and maybe even someone standing in the image, everyone says it's such a powerful image that I thought that it wasn't coming through, like that, even with the context of reality around it, you know. So that just to speak briefly to that, I don't know if these paintings function digitally in the digital world. Like it's almost like it's
Mm.
pulling from the digital world into reality, and that's how they have to function. So there really is this requirement of like embodied fleshiness, real eyes, real bodies. Uh, I would love to come up with maybe a video. Maybe video would actually work better. You know, if we're talking about just posting them on TikTok or whatever. But as far as like the community that might grow up around them, that might find them compelling or beautiful, that's a great question. I would love to actually be able to explore that more. This body of work, it's strange. I think it came out a little too soon, like we say, too soon, you know, because it came out in 2017. Only now do I feel like maybe people have reached a level of exhaustion or personal
Mm.
um, uh, uh, just burnout when it comes to their doom scrolling. Like I don't even think we had the term doom scrolling back when I first made these paintings. And so
Right.
I do wonder if um, maybe some of you know of people who might like a community of folks who might actually like want to engage with this kind of painting more, that maybe this is a conversation happening right now, or like because I don't think that these paintings have found their audience just yet.
Prophets are always ahead of their time, though, aren't they? It kind of goes with
I
the
feel
job
it.
description.
I know, I feel it. Peter Phillips says every theologian in the world. Okay, that's encouraging, Peter, or Pete. Pete, thank you.
Can I say it's really a thing that there is so much about Christianity that's liminal. The whole of Christianity is built around this concept of now but not yet, and so every single thing that I can think of as New Testament lecture and everything is kind of in these pictures about eschatology, about resurrection, about life, about everything, and kind of that pause in coming into completion as well. And so just the possibility of taking a picture like this into a class and suddenly teaching theology through the picture, or through your artistry of what you've designated as reality is absolutely huge. Thank you.
That's so encouraging. That's so encouraging. I really appreciate that feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pete. It made me think like there's like a mantra about creativity for possibilities or creativity for conclusions. That is a question of living in determinate things or always open to mystery. And I think your work really helped us to connect with that possibility of not knowing really what is there, but being able to appreciate or to wait, or even just to stay in that threshold and not concluding, oh yeah, I know what is there. I know like the technique, I know, like the landscape or everything. So I think it's a great example of creativity for possibilities and not for conclusions.
Thank you. Just looking at the chat briefly, there's some reiterations of the idea of epistemological humility and how these paintings might work from that place. I know Caroline says, as a starting place, diffuse the animosity of clashing ideas and help overcome the fear that fuels dogmatism. Yeah, it's so funny because when I initially made these paintings, I wasn't even thinking about epistemological humility. That within the church community that I just described, the Trinity Heights Church community here in New York that I'm a part of, and actually I'm actually on staff as one of the pastors of this community, as an artist, as a working artist, but also as a pastor. And so I live this sort of bivocational life of contemporary painting and pastoral work. Believe it or not, the guy who planted the church is a man named Stephen Chung, who is a Nietzsche scholar, and he was the one who actually handed my faith back to me, so to speak, through coffee meetings for over 3 years. So this work, if we're talking about epistemological humility, this work has grown into that as the paintings have always been themselves, but now it's almost like looking back, I'm able to see exactly what people are suggesting. And I'd actually never thought about that before until this session. So thank you for tying those two things together, because all of our conversations with atheists and agnostics, this is the starting conversation. We outline Genesis 1. We start with the creation narrative, and then it immediately springboards into you will be as God knowing, and that perhaps it's our desire to grasp for godlike knowledge that is where all of our conversations go wrong in the first place. And so if we're able to adopt the epistemological humility of our innate human creatureness, then maybe that this is the place where relationship and good faith conversation can begin. And so yes, I do think that that this is a way, maybe these paintings are illustrating it, but absolutely a way to overcome the fear that fuels dogmatism.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think we have a lot of things to reflect, and I don't know if you can share your presentation. I know we're having like a long chat on Discord, so maybe with the presentation we can have just a sneak peek of what it feels to
Absolutely.
contemplate your work. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's anything else, Jonas, to point at the end of the session. Thank you so much for your attention, and yeah.
Thank you all. I really appreciate the chance. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.